What is going on? Derek Johnson here with another edition of Locked On Jayhawks. We're going to be breaking down KU's huge bounce-back victory, defeating the Houston Cougars, being able to come back from that really bad loss against Cincinnati, being able to beat another elite opponent, strengthening the resume. What a fun one it was for KU. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Thanks for the show. Thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Kansas 69, Houston 56. What a game it was for KU and Allen Fieldhouse. A little bit of a slow start. KU couldn't make a field goal, and then boom, they take control really at the end of the first half, roll into the second half, and then they're up for the entirety of the second half. They lead by double digits for a good amount of it. Really impressive bounce back after the Cincinnati game, which now looking back, it's like, okay, well, Cincinnati's just playing really good ball, and, you know, Bill Self has this magic power at home and on Monday nights in Allen Fieldhouse. So we're going to get into what went for KU, the biggest positives. Do we need to nitpick on any negatives? We'll get to the moments and plays of the game, the stats of the game, the awards of the game, all that and more, as well as some game balls on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work. That defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. So Kansas wins by 13, and this win from a resume perspective is really impressive for KU. It puts them in the at least tied top 5 in college basketball in most quad 1 victories. So already inherently, you know, that's a boost to your resume. If you're looking at quad 1A wins, which is just kind of a more refined, even better, the elite of the elite victories, this now puts Kansas in a position where they are just one behind the lead. Duke has the most quad 1A wins. They have 7. Kansas has 6. So they're one behind there, again, in the top 5 in quad 1 wins. This is a huge resume booster. You look at now, I think Graham Doran, who we're going to have on later this week to talk more bracketology, tweeted this out earlier after the win. He said, Kansas becomes the first team to notch victories against every member of the Big 12's Royal Six, which BYU, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Houston, and Arizona. I mean, that is such a huge boon in a world where teams are playing unbalanced schedules, right? Kansas had to play Iowa State and Arizona as part of their schedule home and home, but where some of these other teams only have to play some of the other good teams maybe once, right? And so Kansas got a tough draw with all of this, but all the teams you played one time, you now beat. And that is important for a couple of reasons. One, it's important for the resume and showing that you're a really good team, which I think they showed again in this one. It also is important from a standpoint of, you know, getting another resume win, showing you can do it with Darryn Peterson in the lineup. If you're KU, that's obviously important. And that's something I talked a little bit about and dispelled in the preview, because now KU has 5 top 30 wins. If you're looking at KenPom with Darryn Peterson in the lineup, they only have 2 without him. So they still do have a better resume with Darryn Peterson. But it's so important too, because we've been talking Big 12 tournament and Big 12 seeding and getting a double bye, the importance of those extra days off when you have the Darryn Peterson situation and just in general a not as deep team. You now have the tiebreakers over BYU, Texas Tech, and Houston. And it's not just the tiebreakers for the Big 12 tournament. You know, what if at the end of the day we're talking about, hey, should Kansas be a 3 seed or should Texas Tech be a 3 seed? And Kansas has the head-to-head, right, for the NCAA tournament, not just the Big 12 tournament. What if Kansas keeps winning games and we're talking about on the 2 line? What if we're talking on the 2 line, hey, should Kansas be the 2 seed or should Houston be the 2 seed? Well, Kansas beat Houston by 13 points. These are huge wins that boost your resume. That could be the difference of getting a slightly easier path to making a deep run in March, right? So those are all important. Again, though, I don't want to understate the importance of having a win like this with Darryn Peterson, because this was the type of win that you had to grit out, that you had to be tough. If you're going to beat Houston, you have to be tough physically and mentally. And with all the discourse and stuff going on around Darryn Peterson, you know, this wasn't the most pleasing game that Darryn Peterson played. This was not a game that Darryn Peterson is going to look up at the box score at the end of the day and go, I was 5 of 14 shooting. I had 14 points. But the fact that he stayed in there all the way through to the very finish, the fact that he was there, and I don't know, some spiritual level of fighting through it with the team, I think comes kind of important here for KU to get through it. And so the win in general is just the biggest positive here, right? And I think in general too, like a theme that we have had all season for this Kansas team, it's been what? It's been powering through adversity and the type of grit that this team shows. think about the adversity, not just of coming off a loss, not just of losing to Cincinnati, but you think about the adversity of how the game started. KU gets a nice and one from Bryson Tiller to get the game started. And then Houston scores 11 straight points. And immediately you're down in a hole 11-3 after we just saw what happened on Saturday. But you climb back, you fight back, you grit it out. You end up taking a 4-point lead at halftime. You have a little bit of an offensive run at the end of the first half, but it was more about KU's defense just shutting down Houston at the end of the first half to allow that run. Right? Showing that level of determination and grit and powering through for Kansas was so important, and continued that theme that we've kind of seen all season long. The defense was really good for KU in this one, right? Maybe a little fortunate of how Houston shot from three. There were a couple open ones that maybe Cenac missed, and that was something Kelvin Sampson mentioned in the postgame. Maybe a few here or there that one of their guards missed and stuff. I did think overall, though, a lot of the ones that the guards were taking, right? There's one I can think of that Sharp was just like wide open and he missed. But I will say a lot of the ones that Flemings or Sharp took were pretty well contested by KU in the end. Like the Cenac ones were open, but he goes 1 of 4. Like, okay, even if he goes 2 for 4, it doesn't change the game, KU did a really good job defensively in this one. You hold Houston to 32% from the field. That's going to win you a lot of games. We're just talking 2-point shots. They were 16 of 32 from the floor. And you did a good job avoiding fouls. You did a good job of I get it. Houston still had 13 offensive rebounds. We've seen some games this year where KU's given up too many offensive rebounds. And maybe in a normal game to a team who's not a great offensive rebounding team, I would be sitting there going, yeah, 13 offensive rebounds given up is maybe a little bit more than you would like. But against Houston, a team who is one of the best year in and year out offensive rebounding teams in the country, like even after this game, they're top 25 in the country in offensive rebound rate. But at the end of the day, this was Houston's 3rd worst offensive rebound rate of the season. The only games that were worse, TCU, a game they won by 9, the Iowa State game that they lost, and now the Kansas game. So actually, this was a really good defensive rebounding game for KU, and part of playing good defense is grabbing the defensive rebound, and they did an excellent job of that. How about Tre White? I mentioned him a little bit earlier, 23 points, and this is a guy we had been talking about in a little bit of a rut for KU, and he really did a little bit of everything of what we had seen when Tre White was looking like an NBA player to get back into it this game, right? He was efficient. He goes 6 of 9 from the floor. He was making 3-point shots. He goes 3 of 4 on 3-point shots. I think above all, this is the big one for me with Tre White. Kansas as a team is not a great team at getting to the free throw line, but Tre White is, when he is on, a really good player at getting to the free throw line. And he did in this game. He goes 8 of 8 at the foul line. So it's not just that he was getting there, he was making them. He goes 8 of 8. Houston as a team goes 9 of 9. So, it's very easy to correlate, hey, KU was at their best when Tre White is playing really well. And so much so that, this was a game you only got 4 points from Flory Badunga. If I would have told you coming into this, that Flory was only going to give you that you were going to get just 6 points from the bench, albeit, the KU bench isn't typically one that scores high totals, but still, you were only going to get 6 points from the bench, 4 points from Flory Badunga. I don't know how good you would have felt, especially if I told you, on the top of that, Darryn Peterson's only going to go 5 of 14. How good would you have felt about the win? But because Tre White went off, because you got some timely buckets here and there from some other guys, got to the free throw line, because the defense was that good for KU, you win this game by 13. And yes, it was also a positive to see Darryn Peterson play this game to the very end in what was a physical game. I mean, Houston was denying him the basketball all the way through, and Emanuel Sharp was all over him all game long. So he had to really work just to even get the ball, and that was impressive there too. Now, if you do want to point nits and say, what are some of the negatives of this one? I mean, if you wanted to, you could point to the fact that KU didn't have the biggest post scoring effort. Even Tiller's 11 points didn't really come mostly in the post. Flory only got 4, but that's just kind of playing against Houston. I don't really want to get into the negatives of this one. I just want to celebrate the win. It was a 13-point win for KU over a top 10 opponent at home. And for that reason, you got to be happy with it. And bottom line, this is a gigantic win, as we talked about earlier, for the resume. It's a gigantic win for just, feeling right again after losing that Cincinnati game. So let's get to our moments and plays of the game. We'll get to our stats of the game, awards of the game. We'll get out some game balls as well. Coming up next, this is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda, moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen. You know, that first half started to get a little bit ugly, maybe for KU, right? You're down 11-3. You didn't make a field goal for like 9 minutes of game time almost, or maybe it was like 8 minutes. It was getting a little ugly there, right? KU was able to get to the free throw line, steady themselves, but it felt like the moment that kind of took the lid off the basket really for KU was the Jamari McDowell three in the first half. That was KU's first three in the first half. I think they ended up hitting 2 or 3 in the first half in general. And Jamari McDowell ends up with 2 made threes for the game. But that first one that just, because it wasn't just that KU had a lid on the basket for the first half of this game, they had a lid on the basket from 3 in the previous game. So that was such an important moment for KU because I think they started 0 for 5 from 3. That means they finished, 7 of 12 from 3 to finish out the game, right? That was all started by Jamari McDowell. These moments remind us what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to Mazda because there's more to you. This episode of the show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on an NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2, flights, tickets, the whole experience. Plus, action on the KU basketball games. You know, my wife before the game goes, I'm feeling Tre White's going to have a big game. She actually wound up betting on Tre White to hit 3+ threes, and she's a big winner tonight on FanDuel. So congrats to her and any others who were on Tre White. You can visit FanDuel too, FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future. Get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club and get the ad-free version of the show and join our Discord server, lockedonpodcasts.com/everydayer. Kansas wins 69-56 over Houston. Moments and plays of the game. I mean, honestly, it felt like the start of the game was a great moment for KU, right? Darryn Peterson barely draws iron on the opening 3. Tiller grabs it, puts it back in, and gets fouled. And it's like, okay, Tiller had a bad game against Cincinnati. That's going to be a great sign. KU getting off to a good start. And then you gave up an 11-0 run, and you couldn't make a shot from there, right? But after that, it felt like you started to get your mojo. Flory had a big, one-handed dunk in the first half, and I think they scored on the next possession. But I don't know. It felt like KU kept making moves and then Houston would respond and counter. And then finally it was that Jamari McDowell 3. And I guess I think he had 2 in the first half for KU that ended up being the kind of ceiling raisers for KU in that first half, right? And then I would say just in general, the end of first half defense was phenomenal for KU. I can't really give that a moment. It's a long stretch of time. But then it all kind of culminated with Darryn Peterson hitting that little runner, that floater at the end of the first half. That was a big moment to make it feel like you were capitalizing, to where there were moments throughout that first half where I was just thinking in my head, I was like, man, you've gone 8 minutes, 9 minutes without a bucket. If you can just have this at 5 or 6 of what you're down at halftime, I think you're going to feel okay with that you just hope you start making shots in the second half. So just stay within range. And it turns out you just wound up 4 at halftime. So that ended up working out for KU. I really like that. I mean, there was a couple of good moments, especially in transition for KU to start the second half. The one play where Tre White throws the basically full court pass up ahead that gets dunked by Melvin Council. That was a really cool moment in this one. Just Tre White in general, those 2 corner threes that he hit in the second half both came at different moments and big moments for KU, to say the least. And then it felt like there was a big moment where, Houston started creeping in a little bit. They got it down to 13. KU had gone a little bit cold, and it's still a comfortable lead at 13, but especially after what Houston did last year in Allen Fieldhouse, there's at least a little spark in the back of your mind of okay, let's not play around with, don't play with your food here, right? Don't let it get to a similar situation. Put this thing away. And Jamari McDowell kind of put it away with that 3 that put you back up 16, which was right after there were a couple plays that Jamari made where I think a lot of people in the crowd were, what is Jamari doing there? What's going on there? And then he makes that big 3 to make it up to a 16-point game. And then also Darryn Peterson kind of having the dagger 3. That was just kind of a cool, it felt like a moment, I'm sure, for him and a lot of the players on the team, and even, fans who have quickly come to support Darryn Peterson, with the idea of, like, I don't know, it felt a little cathartic to see him hit that three, especially in a game where, it wasn't his most efficient, but to have that three was kind of an important moment, especially as it came at the end of the game, which he kept playing through. And kind of in hindsight, like, here, I'm going to give out a quick award on this one. Blessing in disguise award. Is there any blessing in disguise that Darryn Peterson got in foul trouble in the first half, right? He picks up those 2 fouls in the half. Bill Self actually put him back in at one point, playing with the 2 fouls in the first half. And then he took him back out with, like, it comes back in around 7 minutes. I think went back out around 2 minutes and then comes in for the last possession. Did that actually work out in KU's favor that he got in foul trouble in the first half because it allowed him to sit more in the first half? Like, is there some lesson KU and Bill Self should be taking away from that? I don't know, maybe. Other awards of the game. What was your favorite Kansas field goal in the first 8 minutes and 17 seconds of the game? Here's the candidates. Bryson Tiller's and one. End of list. But no, many other fun field goals that were made after that. Okay, I don't know. This is going to be a totally random one. I was at the game for this one, and apparently I don't know if this is like a season-long thing. They've been doing this only the second game I've gone to this year because I try to be home and, do these shows and stuff. But they had a giveaway, which was, this taco place where if a player for Kansas hits 3 threes in a game, you get like free queso or something. I was like, cool, free queso and stuff. And the place is in Kansas City, which, like, I get it. There are a lot of KU fans are coming in from Kansas City, which, by the way, quick shout out to this one. Declan and his brother, who were sitting next to us at the game, introduced himself. Awesome people. So shout out to you, Declan. I also met somebody, Sky Antiochi. So shout out to anybody who sees me, I guess, in public. And I really do appreciate the people who are like, hey, I'm an everyday, or I'm listening to the show, and, like, really cool to meet people, like, in person. So it honestly blows my mind when that happens. So anyway, shout out to Declan, who's from Kansas City. So maybe he's going to get the free queso, right? Shout out to that. But I'm just sitting there like, can we not find a Mexican restaurant in Lawrence? That's going to be, can we not find a Mexican restaurant in Lawrence Ward? There's a lot of good ones. What are we doing here? I don't know. I guess it's based on who wants to buy the sponsorship. Our stats of the game for this one, holding Houston to 32%. That is a gigantic stat. In general, you're going to win. If you don't win a game where you hold the opponent to 32% when you're playing at home, like, what are we doing here, right? So that was a good stat for KU in this one. I mentioned, even though Houston had 13 offensive rebounds, they missed 45 shots, and their offensive rebound rate, when you're just looking at, like, the percentage of the misses they offensive rebounded, it was their 3rd worst offensive rebounding game of the season. That's an elite offensive rebounding team. You did a pretty good job there. I think that's a really good stat to point out in this one. The points in the paint being 24-24, I found interesting. It's not going to be our stat of the game, but the fact that KU who's a team who typically thrives on scoring in the paint, was able to adjust and win a game a different way, I do think at least stood out to me a little bit. 12-5 in fast break points. That's a big advantage for KU. 11-7 in assists. So they were doing a really good job, guarding Houston, I guess, off ball, to preventing them from getting open and easy assists. But I do think for me, it is, I don't know, it's either 32% or it's keeping Houston in a game where they missed a lot of shots. It would have been easy for them to rack up 20-25 offensive rebounds. Holding them in check, I think, ends up being kind of the stat of the game here for KU. All right, let's get to our game balls. Who gets an offensive game ball, defensive game ball, overall game ball, and what's next for the Jayhawks? Pretty big one coming up on Saturday, too. We'll get to all that next on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time researching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all the boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners to the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Thanks again for joining us here on the show. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club, get the ad-free version, and join our Discord server, lockedonpodcasts.com/everydayer. Our game balls for KU. So offensive game ball for Kansas. I think you probably know where this one is going when you have a guy score 23 points on 9 shots and hit 3 3-pointers. But let's at least, interview some other candidates in honor of Indeed there, right? So Darryn Peterson, second on KU in 14 points, but, it took 14 shots. It wasn't the prettiest game, more turnovers than assists. Still helpful, but yeah. Melvin Council had 11 points. He also had 4 assists, but 3 turnovers, 0 of 2 from 3. Bryson Tiller had 11 points. That was huge. He also had 4 offensive rebounds. That was more than half of KU's offensive boards, but he also had 4 turnovers. There were some, it was a David McCormick type of game for Bryson Tiller, where there were some like head scratching moments and there were some like really good moments. So that was kind of a fun one there. And then you could even bring up like Jamari McDowell hitting 2 threes off the bench as a possible honorable mention candidate. In fact, he was plus 14 in 27 minutes, which was tied second on the team. But yeah, no need to mess around with it. Like Tre White is your offensive game ball here. 23 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 3 of 4 from 3. He had an offensive rebound. He had an assist. He had no turnovers. He was just smooth. And the biggest thing was when Tre White has been his best and been most valuable to KU, he's being aggressive. He's getting to the free throw line. 8 for 8 from the free throw line. So Tre White gets the offensive game ball. Defensive game ball for KU. So you get a steal from White, you get a steal from Council, you get a steal from McDowell, and then you get a block from Marco. You get 2 from Flory and 3 from Tiller. Now, Bill Self actually called out, I guess in a positive way, it's kind of a backhanded compliment. I don't know if it was on the radio interview or the actual press conference, but the Jamari McDowell, he kind of, it was the backhanded compliment of, normally he's not a great defender, but he defended his butt off today. I'm paraphrasing there, but that's basically what he said. So I don't know, maybe we'll put Jamari McDowell as a honorable mention or at least a candidate here for this award. I do think there is something to the idea of Flory's defensive. I know it wasn't a good offensive game for Flory. He only had 4 points. He had 0 offensive rebounds, but the dude had 7 defensive rebounds that led KU in a game where you did a pretty good job against Houston on the glass. He had 2 blocks, and there's a reason why Flory had the best plus minus on the team at plus 17, right? Sometimes individual game plus minus can be a little fluky, but I do think there's something to that in Flory's impact just in general. When he's on the floor, KU is always so much better defensively. But this is what I'm actually going to give the defensive game ball to. And it's not quite an individual player and more of a concept. But okay, think about this. So Kingston Flemings is supposed to be a top 10 pick now in the NBA draft. He'll be an all Big 12 player, right? And he scored 16 points. He put up good numbers, but he goes 6 of 18 to get to that point. Emanuel Sharp, who is one of the best scorers and shooters in the conference in the country, right? He's averaging combined. Flemings and Sharp are putting up like 33 points per game this season on very high efficiency, around 40% from 3. Combined, they had 21 points in this game on 7 of 28, 25% from the floor. Some of that goes to Melvin Council. Some of that goes to Jamari McDowell. Some of that goes to Marco Jackson. Some of it goes to Darryn Peterson. I just want to talk about the guard defense for KU being the defensive game ball here, right? And then the overall game ball for KU, I think that would still just go to Tre White at this point in time. That was such an offensive lift. He had a third points. It's one thing to score 23 points in a game. You score 80. It's still impressive. But to put 23 in a game where the opponent scores 56 makes it just even that much more valuable. So Tre White gets the overall game ball here. So what's next for KU? Well, it's a pretty big one at Arizona on Saturday. And Arizona, it sounds like, could be without a couple players, more notably Koa Pete. He's not going to be playing in there. I think they're playing Baylor during the week, but it sounds like he's on the wrong side, questionable for the KU game. So that'll be something that, now Pete didn't have a great game in Lawrence, but that'll be something they have to adjust for. And while Pete could be out for Arizona, Peterson could be in for Kansas in that one. So you would think, hey, well, Kansas beat Arizona the first time, and now the player personnel, there's a positive swing for KU. Like, you would think that's a good thing. Obviously, though, it'll be at Arizona instead of Allen Fieldhouse. But, even though this will be a game KU is underdogs in, I'm not discounting them at all, especially with the grit that this team shows. And then they'll finish up the season at Arizona State and versus K-State. Go 2-1 in that stretch, and you'll feel good. If you go 3-0, maybe you do still have an outside shot at contending for the Big 12 title. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. I'm going to go hop on the Locked On College Basketball live stream to talk about this game as well, so you can join us over there too. Thank you so much for joining us again. Thank you to Declan and everybody who says hi in person, and you're all wonderful people for joining us in the postgame show, and we will get you ready for that Arizona show later, or Arizona game later in the week. We're also going to have Graham Darryn talk more bracketology. I love having Graham on later this week, and it feels like every time we have Graham on, it's after a big win. So maybe I just need to have Graham on after every game. But catch you next time on Locked On Jayhawks.